You never forget the kind of night when the sky feels too quiet, when even the wind refuses to breathe. That was the night a little boy named Evan Parker, just 6 years old, vanished from the small town of Cedar Ridge, Colorado. And that was the night a police dog named Ranger did something no one expected, something that would break every rule in the book and change the country's heart forever. The evening started like any other. Parents packing up after a fall festival, kids chasing each other with glow sticks, and the sound of country music humming through the park. But somewhere between laughter and the slow dimming of lights, Evan slipped away. 1 second he was standing near the pumpkin stand. The next, he was gone. His mother, Caroline Parker, told officers, "He was holding my hand. I swear he was right here." I turned for 1 second. Just 1 second. And then her voice dissolved into shaking breaths. They thought it would be a simple search, a wandering kid, a curious boy chasing fireflies, but minutes turned into an hour, and the temperature dropped fast. It was the first truly cold night of October, below freezing, once the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The officers on duty knew they were running out of time. That's when Ranger arrived. Ranger wasn't just any police dog. He was a K9 tracking specialist, a massive German shepherd with deep amber eyes and a reputation for finding what others couldn't. His handler, Officer Daniel Hale, stepped out of the cruiser, clipped on Ranger's harness, and looked the mother straight in the eyes. "We're going to find him," Hale said. He didn't whisper it as comfort. He said it like a promise carved in stone. Ranger lowered his nose to Evan's jacket, small, blue, still warm, and inhaled deeply. His muscles tightened, his tail stiffened, and then he pulled forward, almost ripping the leash from Hale's hand. "He's got something!" Hale shouted. The searchlights cut through the darkness as Ranger led the team toward the tree line at the edge of the park. Every parent held their child closer. Every officer froze at the thought of a missing 6-year-old wandering into the woods after dark. It didn't take long for the first rule to break. Ranger wasn't supposed to pull ahead of the team. He wasn't supposed to ignore voice commands. But that night, something in him, something primal, powerful, and unexplainable took over. He charged into the forest, and before Hale could stop him, Ranger snapped his leash clean off. "Ranger! Ranger!" Hale yelled. But the dog was gone, swallowed by darkness. The forest was dense, every branch blackened against the moonlight. The officers spread out, calling Evan's name. The mother sobbed into her sweater, and deep inside the woods, Ranger ran harder than he ever had, guided by a scent, yes. But something else, too. Something urgent, something he refused to ignore. He darted between trees, paws pounding the frozen earth. He crossed a creek, splashing ice water up his legs. He slid down a slope and lunged into the thick underbrush. And then he stopped. His ears snapped forward, his eyes narrowed. A faint sound rippled through the dark, soft, shaky, almost swallowed by the wind. A child's cry. Ranger sprinted, branches whipped against his sides, tearing small cuts in his fur. But he didn't slow. He followed the whimpering sound until he burst into a clearing and skidded to a halt. There, near the old abandoned mine entrance, sat a tiny blue jacket. Evan's jacket. Ranger nudged it, then sniffed the ground. The scent was strong, fresh, scared, alone. The boy had been there only moments earlier. Ranger barked, loud and sharp, a warning call and a cry for help all at once. But no one answered, no footsteps, no voices, no officer's flashlight cutting through the trees. He was alone. And in that moment, something shifted inside Ranger. He lowered his head, listened again, and heard it, this time clearly. A weak, trembling voice echoing from inside the mine tunnel. "Mom," Ranger growled low. Entering an unstable mine was against every protocol. Even trained officers avoided it. A dog was never supposed to go in alone, but Ranger didn't hesitate, not even for a heartbeat. He pushed his body into the narrow entrance, squeezing past broken beams and cold stone walls. The darkness closed around him. Dust fell from above. Every step echoed through the hollow tunnels. Evan's scent grew stronger, and then Ranger saw him. A tiny figure curled near a collapsed corner of the mine, shivering violently, his cheeks streaked with tears and dirt. Evan looked up with wide, terrified eyes. "Doggy," he whispered. Ranger moved slowly toward the boy, tail low, ears soft. He pressed his warm body against Evan's frozen hands, letting the child clutch his fur. But just as Ranger prepared to lead him out, the ground trembled. A deep cracking sound rolled through the mine. Dust rained from above. The earth shifted beneath Ranger's paws. Something was about to give way. And help was still nowhere in sight. To be continued. The trembling in the mine grew stronger, like the earth itself was warning them to leave. Ranger pressed closer to Evan as pebbles rattled down from the ceiling, bouncing off the cold floor. The boy's breathing grew faster, shallow, panicked. "Is it gonna fall?" Evan whispered, his voice cracking with fear. Ranger didn't understand the words, but he understood the fear. He nudged the boy's shoulder gently, then stepped toward the tunnel entrance, encouraging him to move. But the moment Evan tried to stand, his ankle buckled beneath him, and he cried out in pain. "My foot. It hurts. I can't walk." Ranger circled back, sniffing the swollen ankle, his warm breath calming the boy for a few precious seconds. But time was slipping away. Every vibration, every shift of rock above them meant they were seconds from being trapped forever. Outside, Officer Hale and the search team were still combing the woods, following faint echoes of Ranger's bark. Hale's chest tightened with every passing minute. He knew his partner. He knew Ranger wasn't reckless. If the dog had broken protocol, if he had run off, something was desperately wrong. He shouted into the darkness, "Ranger, buddy, where are you?" No answer, just the cold wind dragging through the branches. Back inside the mine, Ranger made a decision. He lay down beside Evan, pushed his body underneath the boy's small frame, and lifted with slow, careful strength. Evan wrapped his arms around Ranger's neck, biting back tears as pain shot up his leg. Okay. I'll hold on," he whispered. Ranger took one step, then another, steady and patient. The tunnel was tight, the ceiling too low in places, forcing him to crouch. Wooden support beams groaned like old bones as he passed. Every sound echoed for miles. Evan clung to Ranger's fur, bearing his face into the dog's neck. Each time dust rained from above. They reached the first bend when a loud crack thundered through the tunnel. Ranger froze. A chunk of rock slammed down behind them, sealing off the chamber they had just left. Evan screamed, clutching a Ranger tighter. "It's falling! Please don't let it fall!" Ranger's ears flattened. He pushed forward faster now, weaving around sharp rocks, his paws slipping on the uneven ground. The air thickened with dust, making Evan cough and tremble. But the boy held on, trusting the dog completely. Another crack, another shudder. Another warning. Outside, Officer Hale suddenly stopped walking. He turned his head, listening. There, a faint, distant rumble from deep under the ground. His stomach dropped. "The mine," he whispered. "He's in the old Ridgeway mine." The officers exchanged terrified looks. That mine had been condemned for 20 years. Entering it was suicide. But Hale didn't hesitate. He ran. "Get the rescue gear, now!" he shouted. Back underground, Ranger finally saw it. The faintest sliver of moonlight ahead. The exit. They were close, but the opening had narrowed over the years, rocks collapsing inward, creating a jagged passage barely big enough for a child. Ranger lowered himself, pushing forward with Evan clinging to his back. The boy winced as his injured ankle knocked against a stone, but he didn't let go. Every inch was a battle. Ranger squeezed through, scraping his sides, claws scrabbling for grip. Then, with a final lunge, he burst out of the tunnel, sliding into the cold night air. Evan landed on the ground beside him, coughing, shaking, half frozen, but alive. Ranger barked loud and desperate, calling for the team. And this time, someone answered. "Ranger! Evan!" Officer Hale sprinted into the clearing, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. When he saw the boy lying beside his dog, he nearly fell to his knees. He rushed forward, sweeping Evan into his arms. "Hey, buddy. Hey, you're okay. You're safe now," Hale whispered, his voice breaking. Evan clung to him, but his eyes drifted to Ranger. He saved me. He didn't leave me." Hale looked at Ranger. The dog was exhausted, trembling, sides heaving, dust and dirt covering his fur. But he stood proudly, watching over the boy until the very last moment. "You did good," Hale whispered, placing a hand on Ranger's neck. "You did damn good." But the danger wasn't over, because as the rescue team gathered around, the ground behind them shook again, this time harder. The entrance Ranger had squeezed through began to crumble, rocks tumbling and crashing down in a violent roar. And in the chaos that followed, the country would learn the truth. Ranger hadn't just led the boy out. He hadn't just broken the rules. He had gone into a collapsing mine alone, knowing no one would reach him in time. And that single act, the moment where instinct, loyalty, and bravery collided, was only the beginning of the story that would capture America's heart. The roar of collapsing rock echoed through the clearing, like thunder rolling across the mountains. Dust shot into the air as the mine entrance caved in completely, sealing off the tunnel Ranger had just escaped from. The rescue team stumbled back, shielding their faces. Evan buried his head into Officer Hale's chest, shaking uncontrollably. Ranger didn't flinch, even trembling, even covered in dirt and blood from the sharp stones inside the mine. He stood tall, eyes fixed on the ruins as if daring the earth to challenge him again. Hale looked down at his partner and exhaled a shaky breath. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew it was going to cave." Ranger didn't break eye contact with the rubble. He simply let out a low, soft grunt, as if confirming everything without a word. Paramedics rushed to Evan, checking his pulse, his ankle, his breathing. But the boy kept looking past them, kept looking at the dog who had carried him out of the dark. "He didn't leave me," Evan said again, voice thin but certain. "He stayed with me the whole time, even when it got scary." The paramedics exchanged glances, and for a moment, all of them paused, recognizing the weight of what had happened. Hale knelt beside Ranger, brushing dirt from the dog's fur. His hands shook. "You broke every rule in the manual tonight," he murmured. "Every single one." Ranger leaned into his touch. "But if you hadn't, that boy wouldn't be alive." The moment didn't last long. More officers arrived, followed by rescue crews, reporters, flashing lights, and neighbors awakened by the commotion. Word spread fast in a small town. A child found, a mine collapse, a dog leading the rescue. By the time they guided Evan to the ambulance, the crowd had grown thick with whispers, fear, relief, disbelief. Evan held the paramedic's hand, but when the doors were about to close, he jolted upright. "Wait! Ranger! He has to come with me!" The paramedic exchanged a glance with Hale. "We can't take the dog inside, but we'll bring him right behind you, okay?" Evan's face crumpled. Tears welled, silent and heavy. "He saved me." "Please." Hale stepped forward. "I'll ride behind you, kid. Ranger won't leave your side." That seemed to be enough. Evan nodded, still trembling, and let the doors close. As the ambulance pulled away, Hale turned to find Ranger no longer standing tall. The dog's legs buckled, just slightly, just enough for Hale to understand. He caught Ranger with both arms. Hey, easy. I've got you." Ranger wasn't unconscious. He wasn't dying. But now that Evan was safe, now that the danger had passed, the adrenaline drained from his body all at once. Every scrape, every bruise, every exhausted breath caught up with him in a tidal wave. "You pushed too hard," Hale whispered, feeling Ranger's heart pounding fast, way too fast. "You should have waited for backup, but you never do you?" Ranger lifted his head weakly and touched his nose to Hale's chin. A tired apology, or maybe a tired refusal to apologize. Hale laughed under his breath, one of those laughs people make when they're too close to crying. An officer approached. "We can call the K-9 vet to meet you at the station." Hale shook his head. "No, he's coming with me." "We're following the ambulance." They loaded Ranger gently into the back of Hale's patrol SUV, laying blankets beneath him. Hale kept one hand on his partner at all times as he drove, knuckles white on the wheel. When they arrived at the hospital, a nurse came running. "Which one's the dog? We got a call about a K-9 who needs immediate care." Hale opened the back door. Ranger lifted his head slowly, eyes tired but alert. The nurse blinked, not expecting a dog his size, nor expecting the wounds carved into his fur. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured. "You saved that boy, didn't you?" Ranger let out a soft, tired breath, and the nurse nodded as if he had spoken. They guided him inside through a side entrance. Hale walked beside him, one hand on Ranger's harness, the other steadying his side. Every step was slow, careful. Inside the pediatric unit, Evan lay in a small hospital bed, ankle-wrapped, eyes drooping with exhaustion. But when he heard footsteps, he forced himself up. "Ranger," the nurse smiled. "He wanted to see you." Ranger stepped into the room, tail barely wagging. Evan reached out with both arms. The dog pressed his head gently into the boy's hands, closing his eyes as if the touch alone was enough to ease every ache. "You came back," Evan whispered. Ranger licked a tear from his cheek. Hale watched from the doorway, the weight of the night settling on his shoulders. He didn't know yet that what happened in that mine would spread far beyond Cedar Ridge. He didn't know that within 24 hours, the entire nation would be talking about Ranger. But in that room, in that quiet moment between a boy and the dog who saved him, none of the cameras or headlines mattered. All that mattered was that both of them were alive. Both of them had made it out, and a bond had been forged in the darkest part of the earth, one no rulebook could ever define. Morning came slowly to Cedar Ridge, painting the hospital windows with a soft golden light. But inside room 214, where Evan slept with Ranger curled on the floor beside him, nothing felt calm. Nurses moved quietly through the halls, whispering to each other, phones buzzing nonstop. Word had gotten out. By sunrise, dozens of messages flooded the police department. Reporters waited outside the hospital doors. People across the state were already calling Ranger a hero, but the one person who wanted none of the attention was Ranger himself. He didn't understand cameras or headlines. He only understood the boy. Officer Hale stepped into the room, holding a cup of coffee he'd barely touched. Ranger lifted his head at the sound of Hale's footsteps, ears perked but body still tired. Evan stirred awake, blinking through the soft morning haze. "You're still here," Evan whispered. Ranger stood and gently placed his front paws at the side of Evan's bed, laying his head beside the boy's hand. Evan stroked the animal's fur slowly, as if afraid he might disappear if he blinked too long. Hale smiled. "I told you he wouldn't leave." Evan looked up. "Is he okay?" Hale hesitated, not because Ranger was in danger, but because he didn't want to worry the boy. "He's banged up, kiddo, just tired. But he'll be all right." Evan nodded, satisfied, and leaned back on his pillow. Ranger stayed close, their breathing sinking, slow and steady. A knock sounded at the door, breaking the fragile quiet. Caroline Parker, Evan's mother, stepped in. Her eyes were swollen, hair messy, hands trembling from a night without sleep. The moment she saw her son awake, tears streamed down her face. "Oh, sweetheart." She rushed to him, gathering him in her arms. I thought I lost you." Evan clung to her, but his hand reached down to touch Ranger's head, as if making sure she knew who to thank. Caroline stared at the dog through blurred vision. "You found my son. You saved him." Her voice cracked. "How do you thank someone who does that?" Ranger blinked at her softly, tilting his head. Hale stepped closer. "Ma'am, you don't thank him. You just let him know he did good." But the emotional reunion didn't last. A heavy voice echoed from the hallway. "This is a restricted area. Media is not allowed up here." Hale turned just in time to see a flood of reporters pushing past a hospital security guard, cameras held high, microphones thrust forward. "Officer Hale, is it true the dog entered the mine alone? Was the department aware he broke K-9 protocol? Is the boy safe because of the dog, or because of a failure in police procedures?" The questions were sharp, weaponized. Hale felt heat rise in his chest. Reporters weren't interested in the truth. They were interested in drama. But before he could answer, a small voice cut through the noise. "He saved me. Leave him alone." Evan's words were soft, but powerful. The crowd stilled. "He didn't wait. He didn't run away. He carried me out." Evan continued, gripping Ranger's fur. "If he didn't go in, I'd still be there." Caroline stood behind him, eyes fierce. "My son is alive because of that dog. Nothing else matters." Ranger seemed to sense the tension. He stepped between Evan and the reporters, body tense, head low. Not aggressive, protective. Hale placed a calming hand on his partner's back. "That's enough. All of you, out, now." Hospital security stepped in, pushing the reporters back down the hallway. The doors shut, restoring silence. Hale ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, Caroline. I didn't think they'd find this floor." Caroline sighed. "It's not your fault. People want stories. They forget they're talking about a child." Evan stroked Ranger's ear again. "Are they mad at him?" Hale knelt beside the bed. "No. Some people just want rules followed, but heroes don't always follow rules." Ranger leaned into Hale's hand, exhausted but proud. Later that afternoon, something unexpected happened. The door opened again, but this time it wasn't reporters. It was Chief Marlowe, the head of the Cedar Ridge Police Department. A stern man, tall, silver-haired, always serious. Hale stiffened immediately. "Chief, I can explain." Marlowe raised a hand. "Not here. Come with me." Hale's stomach tightened. He looked at Ranger, then at Evan. The dog's ears flattened as if he sensed something was wrong. Caroline whispered, "It'll be okay." But Hale wasn't so sure. Marlowe led him into the empty hallway. For a moment, he said nothing. His eyes scanned the chaos still happening downstairs. Reporters everywhere, flashing lights, crowds gathering. Then he spoke, low and sharp. "You and that dog broke protocol. You lost control of your K-9 during an active search. You entered a condemned structure without backup. And you caused national attention we were not prepared for." Hale swallowed hard. "Sir, if we waited, you could have died. The boy could have died. And the dog could have died." Marlowe's voice dropped even lower. "There will be an investigation, internal review. The board wants answers." Hale felt the ground tilt beneath him. "Chief, Ranger saved that boy's life." "And that's the problem," Marlowe said. "Sometimes saving a life still breaks the rules." The words hit harder than Hale expected. Inside the room, Ranger lifted his head, sensing the tension through the walls. Evan watched the door, fear creeping back into his eyes. "Where's Officer Hale going?" the boy asked softly. Ranger stood, limping slightly, and walked toward the door. He pressed his nose against the bottom, whining quietly, because something deep inside him knew. The hardest part of the story wasn't the mine. It wasn't the cold. It wasn't even the rescue. It was what came after. And the fight to protect the bond between the boy and the dog was only just beginning. The investigation began quietly, but Cedar Ridge was small. News travels fast and stories even faster. By the evening, every local station had footage of Ranger, his fur matted and dirty, standing proudly beside Evan. Social media erupted. Hashtags like Jafter Hero Dog and Eschtwals Ranger the Rescue Dog trended nationwide. People called, emailed, even sent letters of praise, donations for Ranger, gifts for Evan, messages of thanks to the Parker family. But back at the station, Hale felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. Protocols were in place for a reason. Breaking them, even to save a life, meant consequences. He walked into the Internal Affairs office, Ranger following closely, tail low, but eyes alert. The walls were bare, the fluorescent lights harsh. Hale was met by two stern officers, file folders in hand. "You're lucky the boy survived," one of them said flatly. "That dog could have been killed. You could have been disciplined. Protocol exists for a reason, Hale." Hale clenched his fists, fighting the frustration. "We followed instinct. The child's life was in immediate danger. Ranger acted. He saved Evan." The officer didn't flinch. "Intentions don't matter. The rules matter. You acted alone. You acted outside the chain of command. This is serious." Hale looked down at Ranger, whose amber eyes met his. The dog didn't care about politics, internal investigations, or rules. He cared only about Evan, about saving a life when seconds mattered. Hale sighed. "He's a hero, and you know it." The officers exchanged glances but said nothing more. Hale left the room, the folder untouched, carrying Ranger with him. Outside, the autumn air was crisp. Leaves crunched underfoot. Hale exhaled and knelt down, letting Ranger sniff the cold wind. "You did everything right," he murmured. Ranger nuzzled his hand. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." At the hospital, Evan insisted on seeing Ranger every day. Even with the attention, even with the flashing cameras from news crews, the boy refused to leave the room without his companion. Nurses and doctors watched the bond in awe, the silent understanding between child and dog that no one else could touch. One afternoon, a woman from a national news network arrived. She approached cautiously, knowing she was entering sacred territory. "Caroline," she said softly, "we want to do a story on Ranger." Caroline shook her head. "This isn't about headlines. This is about a little boy and the dog who saved him." Evan tugged at the hem of her sweater. "Please, Mom, tell them about Ranger." His voice was earnest, unwavering. "He saved me. He deserves everyone to know." Reluctantly, Caroline agreed. Cameras rolled, reporters whispered, lights blinked, and Ranger, ever dignified, sat quietly beside Evan. No tricks, no commands, just presence. His eyes held the weight of the night's danger, the courage it took to face the unknown, and the unspoken pride of a life saved. Across the country, viewers watched, tears forming in eyes, hearts pounding. Children hugged their pets a little tighter. Adults whispered prayers for the brave animals who risk their lives daily for others. Ranger became more than a local hero. He became a symbol of loyalty, courage, and the bond between humans and animals that words can barely capture. But even as the fame spread, Hale and the Parker family knew the challenges weren't over. Protocols could be enforced, policies could be rewritten, and awards might be given. But nothing would restore the quiet night when Ranger went alone into a collapsing mine. Nothing would erase the fear that gripped Evan. And nothing would prevent the world from trying to claim Ranger as theirs, as a national icon, instead of respecting the bond he shared with one small boy in a small Colorado town. As night fell over Cedar Ridge again, Evan slept safely with Ranger at his side, and Hale sat outside the hospital room, thinking about how fragile life truly was. Ranger lay next to the bed, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, exhausted but alive. He had broken rules, faced danger alone, and come out unscathed, but he had also reminded everyone that sometimes doing the right thing means stepping beyond what's written, beyond what's allowed, and trusting the instincts that can save a life in a single heartbeat. Hale whispered into the quiet room, "You're more than a canine partner. You're a hero, Ranger. Don't ever forget that." And Ranger, tired but proud, shifted closer to Evan, letting the boy's small hand rest on his head, knowing in the deepest part of him that love, courage, and loyalty had no boundaries. The next morning, Cedar Ridge woke to a town transformed. News vans lined the streets. People gathered at the hospital, some just to catch a glimpse of Ranger and Evan. Flyers and messages filled social media. Everywhere, the word was the same. Ranger saved a child, but Hale knew the truth was far more personal than headlines. It wasn't fame Ranger wanted, and it wasn't fame Evan needed. It was the quiet moments, the small, unspoken bravery, the instinct that had carried them through darkness and collapsing rock. That bond could never be captured in a photograph or a story. Caroline Parker watched her son play quietly with Ranger in the hospital garden. The boy laughed, a sound Hale hadn't heard in hours, and Ranger ran in circles, tail wagging, eyes bright despite the exhaustion. It was simple, pure, life moving forward. Then the mayor arrived, flanked by local media, ready to honor Ranger publicly. Hale watched from a distance, feeling both pride and apprehension. He knew Ranger had no interest in accolades, only in the lives he protected. Still, he allowed himself a small smile as the crowd cheered, cameras flashing, people clapping. Ranger stood stoically, accepting pats and praises with calm dignity. Evan stepped forward, holding Ranger's leash gently. "This is my dog," he said, voice firm but sweet. "He's my hero. He saved me. And I want everyone to know he's the bravest dog in the world." The crowd hushed, listening. And in that moment, it wasn't about rules broken or protocols bent. It wasn't about headlines or trending hashtags. It was about courage, the kind that shows up when no one is watching, the kind that risks everything for someone else, even a small, scared boy in the dark. Hale knelt beside Ranger, stroking his fur. "You did it, buddy. You saved a life. You broke every rule in the book and did what had to be done. And now, the world knows who you are." Ranger looked up at Hale with deep, amber eyes, eyes full of calm, pride, and an unspoken promise. "I will always protect." Evan hugged Ranger tightly, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you for not leaving me." The sun rose higher, bathing the garden in warm light. Birds chirped, leaves rustled, life continued. But somewhere in every heart watching, a truth had taken hold. Heroes aren't always human. Sometimes they come on four paws, with loyalty and courage beyond measure. And in Cedar Ridge, the story of a little boy and a police dog who broke all the rules to save him became legend. A story told and retold, a reminder that bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steadfast, and lives in the eyes of those willing to risk everything for the ones they love. Ranger sat beside Evan one last time before the ceremony ended, watching the crowd fade away, ears twitching at every small sound. Hale stood behind them, proud and quiet. Together, the boy and the dog had survived fear, darkness, and danger. Together, they had taught everyone watching what loyalty, love, and courage really meant. And long after the cameras stopped rolling, long after the headlines faded, Ranger remained exactly who he had always been: a guardian, a companion, and a hero who had stolen not just one boy's life, but the hearts of an entire nation. The bond between them, indestructible, unbreakable, eternal, would live on in every story told, every whisper of bravery, every heart reminded that true courage sometimes walks on four legs.